and welcome to Viva La Vulva, San Francisco. I am your host for the weekend. My name is Dr. Cara Quant, and I am so appreciative of all of you guys being here for this exhibit and this pop-up exhibit. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about myself. I wanted to introduce our artists, and then I wanted to introduce the people that are currently on this panel. So I am, again, Dr. Cara Quant, and I am an internal medicine doctor by day, and I like to curate art exhibits in on my spare time, whatever spare time I have. But the reason why I did it is because I realized in medical school and residency that there wasn't a lot of information around female sexual health. Like if I had a patient that came to me and had a question or problem about pain with sex or problems with orgasm, I was not able to give them the information or the resources that they needed in order to get better, get more pleasure during sex. And so I wanted to do something that was that brought some information about sexual health to the general public, to people that wanted to be aware of their bodies and kind of what's going on, and if they had any issues that there are resources out there for them. And I also appreciate the males in the audience today, and the reason why I say that is because during the last exhibit, this is the second exhibit that I have done. The first one was in downtown LA at a Ren Gallery. But a lot of the males participants came up to me afterwards and they were like, I did not know about this information. Like I didn't know that my sisters or daughters or wives or cousins or whoever it was going through some of these issues or going through, just did not really understand. And so bringing more awareness to everyone around the vulva. And the thing that is special is that it is Women's March Day, and yes, and we are celebrating women and we are celebrating the vulva because this area of our body is very powerful. Like we are literally sitting on our thrones. And actually Dr. Sherry Ross is the one that said that. She has a book called Sheology, and she put that women are sitting on their thrones, and I do believe that. I mean, we have the ability to give birth, we have the ability to bleed every month, we have the ability to, there's so much magnificence to the vulva, and I wanted to empower it as well as empower sexual health, and for people to know that they are not alone, and that there are resources out there for them, for you, for us. And so Lilo is our sponsor. Lilo is the big vibrator company. They are our sponsors. So I thank Lilo for being a part or sponsoring this exhibit. The Pelvic Health and Rehab Center is also our other sponsor. Rachel Gelman is one of the Bay Area directors of the Pelvic Health and Rehab Center. And there's just so many other sponsors that we have had, Metamore. And so I'm grateful that they were able to sponsor this event. And that you guys are here. And so I also wanted to introduce the artists that have wanted to contribute to this art exhibit. So some of the artists are currently on the panel right now. We have Leslie Reed, we have Miles Eastman, we also have Alpha Channeling, who's one of our big artists, Anushka Merchandani, Colette Standish, who is in the audience, Dorian Katz, who is also next to her. We have Hannah Mogbell, who is also here, yes. Jack, I'm gonna mess up the last name, but Gisht, I think is how you pronounce it. Lily Bernard, who did this piece here, and that is it in terms of the artists. So I am grateful that all of these artists have graced these walls with such amazing art about the vulva, art about the woman, the female form, because I think it's beautiful.
I think there's a lot of of things that motivate me to do what I do. I think being, as a physical therapist, I help people be able to have pain-free sex. And that's just so rewarding because sex should be pleasurable, it should not be painful. So that's one of the big reasons why I do what I do, but also I just love that, or I've always been fascinated by sex and sexual health forever because it covers, or it's included in so many things, not just medicine, but art, music. It really can cross so many boundaries and areas, so I just find it really fascinating, and that's, I think, why I'm so passionate about it.
Doing this project, I do workshops where we do the molds and do these castings, and it's rewarding to provide the opportunity for women to discover themselves and to see their own beauty through their own eyes, which I've discovered is incredibly transformative for a lot of women. I used to say that I would see like $40,000 worth of therapy like wash away in an hour session. You know, women that I saw as very sexually liberated and comfortable with their sexuality would do the process and get very nervous and like, what if that boy in 14 was right and it's ugly and whatever, and then they would peel off the mold and look at it and say, the hell was I worried about? This is beautiful. So really providing the opportunity for women to see themselves in a truthful, honest way.
Let's see, my work does not have to do with vulvas, so how do we talk about this? I think my work is really about my lifelong spiritual process and evolution, and so I feel it's really important to just go with what comes through me, and I seem to be drawn to do icons that are self-portraits that speak to myself as every woman in her journey through her life and her healing and her coming into herself.
Well, I want to start a little bit personal because this work is really personal for me. It's been most of my life that I've either been the kid who really wanted to talk about sex at slumber parties when everybody else was like, and onward from there. I thought that there was something wrong with me when I began my sexual journey. I wasn't orgasmic. I felt pretty ashamed about it. I was like, my attitude is good, what's wrong? What was wrong, of course, was the information that I had received and the information that any of my partners had received, not adequate. But I internalized that for a while. I also had a journey of sexual orientation and fluidity to go on, starting at roughly that same time. And even before that, there was something up in my house. I didn't know what it was when I was a child. I didn't learn until I was in my late 20s and my father had died, that my mother had been sexually abused by a family member, and that effectively erased her agency around her sexuality. I'm quite sure she never had an orgasm. I don't know if she ever had any sexual pleasure. She was affected her whole entire life long by this experience, and I grew up in that house, so I was affected by that experience too. And instead of happening to me what happened to my mother and getting shut down, I got fired up, basically. And so when the opportunity came for me to be able to step up and write, speak, teach, talk, be out there as a sexual woman, be a queer activist, do all the things. Each time I've had any opportunity like this, I've generally said yes. What am I going to learn? What am I going to experience? How am I going to stretch? What don't I know that I might find out here? And since we have shitty sex education in our culture, I do feel that many of us learn our information in the gutter. So I feel like I did my best to go to all the gutters, learn as much of the information as possible, aim the information at each other and go, could this all be true at the same time? If any of you learned your sex chops and your sex knowledge by going out and just getting started, our culture treats us like we're not supposed to do that, but what exactly else are we supposed to do? And I'm glad that living in the Bay Area, living on the coast, living in the world that we've begun to create, although it's still work to do, gives us some space to find each other and learn together. And I'm really so happy that you put this together. I'm so glad to be here.
So my journey also started personally. I had a pelvic pain condition which debilitated me back at the age of 29. But I had experienced pain for most of my life. It just debilitated me at that age. And at the time, I was really fortunate that the field of pelvic health physical therapy had started, which saved my life. So thank you, Rachel, and all of your colleagues. But at that time, there wasn't really good support for the sexual impact of the pain and how to bridge the health aspects with the pleasure aspects. And so I found that even though I was getting good pain management, still, and in my case, I had a chronic health condition. It wasn't just provoked by pain, by sex. So there are some people for whom pain is mostly provoked during sex. In my case, I just had a chronic pelvic pain condition. So it was really hard to figure out how to navigate sex with that. And I was asking my physical therapist, I was asking my physicians for some support, and I also had started trying out some techniques to figure out how to integrate on my own. And when I went back to my physical therapist, she said, your pelvis looks different. And I thought, ooh, you can see what I just did? So it was great. So that inspired me to start thinking about maybe doing research to see if I could create some information out there for people, because I couldn't find information. And at the time, my physicians, my physical therapists would ask me if I would speak to their patients, because I thankfully was comfortable talking about sex also. I was fortunate to have parents who took me to Planned Parenthood to take classes in sex ed when I was young. So for me, it seemed like the most natural thing to talk about. So I realized that just being who I was could help other people. So what motivates me the most right now is just knowing that other people don't have to go through that same journey of not having any information out there, and that they can have support. Even though their pain management may be effective, they may not be able to figure out how to integrate that into their sex lives. And so that's really fun for me to be able to help people find a way to personalize that, and have a sex life that matches what they envision.
This is Dr. Diana Atashru. She is an assistant professor of OBGYN at Stanford University, not too far from here. She is also a female sexual pain specialist. And so I wanted to briefly introduce her. She is going to introduce herself, and she's going to talk about how to talk with your doctor about sex and in particular pelvic pain. So please listen up. Thank you, Dr. Atashru.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is definitely the coolest backdrop that I have ever had in a talk, and hopefully this is going to be informative for you. I'm going to try not to be too formal about it, but just in general, I'm a gynecologist, but I did a little bit of extra training in pelvic pain. So a large cohort of the women that I see are women that actually have pain with intercourse or some other condition surrounding sexual pain and what that is. So I have to I tell my patients I'm like CSI. I collect clues and really figure out what's going on. And so hopefully will kind of shed some light to maybe what some of the causes of pelvic pain and the other things associated with it are. The JJ, or my hoo-ha. So this is the kind of terminology that we often hear in the clinic, because patients don't necessarily really feel comfortable talking about that vernacular. 50% of women never really talk about vaginal health with anyone, not even their closest friends or their family. 50% of women as well wonder if their vaginas are normal looking or pretty. And I sometimes see that in my office as well, and we can go into details about that later. Half of women can't identify their vagina on a diagram. They don't really know where it is, or they don't really look down there at all. And 1 in 10 women 16 to 35 years old have difficult time talking to their primary care provider about their own gynecologic health. So this is a big deal. especially I'm a patient as well, so it's a big deal for patients and providers. So
I am co-curating this year's event with Francesca Sadin, who is here from, she's founder of LAI Creatives. And so I am an internist by day, and I also co-curate art exhibits in my spare time. But I am an internist, and I am passionate about female sexual health. And the reason why is because during medical school, during residency, there wasn't a lot of information around women's sexual health. We got a lot of information about erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation, but we didn't get a lot of information about the female sexual health side. So if a woman came to me with problems with pain with sex or orgasms or lack of desire, I did not have the resources or the toolkit that I feel was needed to provide that woman with the appropriate care or who she could go to. And so I wanted to create something that was not within the medical setting, because I feel like sometimes it could be very sterile and uptight in the medical setting. And I also feel like sometimes patients don't really ask the questions that they want to or need to ask in that setting. And so I wanted to do something very creative. I have a kind of background in art. I have my dad who's an artist, my brother who's an artist, and I don't personally do art, but I am passionate about art. And so I wanted to put female sexual health, the medical side, as well as the art side together. I also do feel like art is a means of healing, and the art that you see along the walls was curated to help with this discussion. And so that is the reason why I created Viva La Vulva. And I got together some panelists here, a co-curator, like I said, Francesca, who is here, and we made this event that you guys are in currently.
And of course, this was like a Women's March weekend situation that Cara was envisioning. So it's great to have all of this energy swirling around. And especially, I love that you want to mate the sort of head knowledge base medical model with the heart and spirit of art making. I think that as the co-founder of the Center for Sex and Culture, an entity in San Francisco which is now living in the ether, popping up sometimes. We're sort of a co-sponsor of this, I guess. I find that pop culture is one place where we really learn, and hard culture too, high culture, where we learn how to think about sex, learn our images of sexuality. There's lots about culture that needs to interleave with the hard sciences because neither one has it in our society, right? They both hold people's attention and trust, whether it's earned or not.
My name is Safira. I am a hypnotherapist and a clairvoyant first. So clairvoyant is someone who can see energy. So I see energy fields, auric fields. I read them. I clear things out for people. I also do hypnosis. So the hypnosis work that I do is actually a lot with women, releasing sexual conditioning, cultural conditioning, that sort of thing. I work with women in the Middle East, doing mostly hypnosis and clairvoyant work. I also work with Tantra and Qigong, and so I work with the feminine practices, activating sexual energy through tantric practice, also through yoga, Qigong. There's many practices out there that are very powerful and can help with healing, can help with energy.
I'm Hannah Mokbel, and I did the large vulva painting there in the back, and there's another small one in the back. And I'm just going to read you my artist statement because I am somebody who expresses myself best in writing or in painting. So, but hopefully what I have to say resonates with you. So I began painting my first vulva in 2007, which was a little while back. And my first one was a self-portrait. It was entitled "Don't Be a Pussy" because I hate that pussy is used as a derogatory term for weak and cowardly. And it took a lot of courage for me to begin painting this series. I had to face my fears about what people would say, and I had to man up to paint them. And I feel like pussies are strong and brave, and they bleed and they birth and they persevere. And just because they're soft doesn't mean that they're not strong. And in fact, I feel that their strength lies in their softness and their ability to adapt. And I dream that one day the word pussy will become synonymous with all of the strength and bravery and beauty that they contain. I grew up in a really conservative religious environment, and in that environment, modesty and neatness and purity were projected to be a woman's highest virtue. And on the topic of my body and sex outside of traditional marriage, I felt like there was virtual silence. So I was someone who was molested as a child, and I felt extreme shame and guilt around that. I felt guilty for failing to protect my own modesty, and I believed that I was to blame. And because of that, I no longer felt pure, and because of that emotional weight, I was unable to talk about it or to tell anyone. And I learned as an adult that shame thrives on silence, and that I wasn't alone in my experience. And I learned that silence also causes isolation, and that victims subjected to isolation tend to internalize. So it's important to have a voice. And without a voice, victims of sexual abuse often implode, and they harbor self-loathing for this unspoken ugliness, which often doesn't have a name. So reclaiming and embracing my own sexuality and boundaries and personal agency has been a process, and creating empowering art about and for women has been a big part of that healing process. I paint because I feel like it's time to give vulvas a voice and a face and a visual space for their existence. I feel like art is a visual language, and so I'm trying to create a visual space in creating these paintings. And I also wanted to contrast the feelings of shame and smallness and silence, which I knew too well. So to shine the light on those areas of darkness, I created vaginas that were 4 feet tall and bold and beautiful, and I wanted them to be dignified portraits that demand respect. And I wanted the portraits to be very intimate and unapologetic and just proud. So they're not ambiguous images disguised as flowers, but they're real portraits of real women at their most vulnerable, daring greatly. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Colette Standish, and I'm part of the show. My work's 3 big watercolor pictures, paintings.
Colette, can you get it a little closer to your mouth?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? It's quite funny because usually I'm quite loud. So yeah, those are paintings that actually were shown first at the Centre for Sex and Culture. So they had their first opening there. I am an erotic based artist, but I'm more like an artist that uses eroticism in all different kind of levels, whether it's painting, whether it's film, video, sculpture, and a lot of my influences are not just from artists, visual artists, writers, musicians. Patti Smith, Annie Snin, a big part of my repertoire, and in particular Annie Snin. She was a big influence on me, and I remember reading, not necessarily her erotic stuff, but her sensual kind of novels, and I remember thinking, I want to paint the way she writes. So because of that, she had a big influence, and I started to delve more and more into the erotic, and I've been doing it a long time. And I'm very pleased to be here with all these people, and yeah, that's me.
Hello, my name is Christine M. Cordova, also known as Domina Iset, and I am initiated priestess, and my business is Red Temple. It's about uniting spirituality with sexuality. I'm also a fine art and photography model, and my special genre there is erotic and sensuality, and I'm also an erotic performance artist, moving into video and film this year, being guided to do that. I accepted the opportunity to speak here with the intention to be able to share my story on how I reclaimed my sexuality and my sexual power. I was raised in a very strict Roman Catholic environment, and I went to an all-girls boarding school, so I was taught a lot of fear and shame and guilt around my sexuality. So I'd love to be able to support, it's my passion to support men and women to reclaim that part of themselves. So I think that's good.
Thank you, Dr. Cara and Francesca, for inviting me to this event. So I hold both a doctorate in both Chinese medicine and in Western medicine as an MD. And I've been practicing what is integrative and functional medicine. And part of that care with patients is working on a lot of women's health. And as you know, I would assume you know, that there's so many autoimmune diseases this time, and a lot of it comes from a lot of the inner talk that's been going on with ourselves, and I see a lot of women with these autoimmune conditions. And so for me, it's been really important to be able to share to the women that how we need to release a lot of the self-talk. I do a lot of what's called emotional freedom technique, and then I have devices which I think of as advanced forms of technology using bioresonance and plasma technology, and it's basically vibrational medicine, and the vibrational medicine is imperative in the work that we do, both from the mental aspect, but also from a physiological aspect, and changing your own vibration so that you can resonate in a harmonious state, so that your body is basically in a homeostasis. And that's mostly the most important thing with patients that I see. So I do have women that come in for physiological problems, and they have maybe some mental conditions that are affecting their health in their reproductive organs, and so we work through a lot of that in basically harmonizing the physiology, but also helping to release the emotional attachments that come along with that. So I'm very honored to be here, and I'll pass it to Francesca.
Hi. Sorry, I've lost my voice from this week curating the show, so you have to excuse me. I'm Francesca Seiden. I'm co-curator with Cara on this event, and I have two companies, LAI Creatives, which is a magazine and a consulting multimedia marketing event throwing thing. I've been in the arts for over 20 years, and I've also been into at the same time, to balance out the freakazoid of the creative filmmaker and all that, I started a workshop that traveled around the United States called Sexual Alchemy Healing Arts, which combines sound healing using the crystal bowls, sex magic, teaching women how to kind of turn trauma into power using their own sexuality and bringing that into creativity, and then as well as some other fun stuff. So I went to Viva La Vulva last year in LA, where Cara did it with another gallery, and her brother and I are very good friends. So I'm very happy to be finally working with her on this.
And the number one question I get from women who come in is, so what vibrator should I be using? So where did my libido go? So why was my orgasm a thunderclap in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, and now it feels like raindrops on the roof pitter-pattering in my 50s and 60s?
And there's so much we could get into here, and I do like to give a little bit of background about why toys are important for women and why it gets even more important as we get to midlife and beyond. So midlife being the menopause change and beyond. And why is it that men who are age matched, and I'm going to be heterocentric for a minute here, why is it that when women are in relationships with men who are in their postmenopausal years, the men just want to keep going? They could have sex all the time. I hear this from my patients all the time. All I want to do is play with my grandkids, play with my kids, read a book, watch TV, and all my partner wants to do is have sex. I will tell you that nature was not fair to women. And here's why. What happens when we go through menopause? Does anybody know why we go through menopause? How come men don't go through menopause? Someone take a guess. Just take a guess. Why do we go through menopause? So to stop having kids. To stop having kids. And what happens? We're animals, right? You know, when like they do these studies and they'll say, you know, rats kind of, when they're fertile, they're most fertile is when they start positioning themselves and showing like their partner. They put their hind part up to show that they're ready and willing. Well, we are animals, right? And so at some point, evolution decided that women should stop having children, probably to make sure that the younger generation survived. So women probably died a lot more in childbirth, leaving small children to fend for themselves. So this is called the grandmother theory. And for that reason, evolution made us not have babies anymore so that we could take care of our children and our grandchildren. What did the men have to do during that time, back in our ancestor caveman days? They had to go out, kill the food, bring the food back, but they also had to make sure that the species continued, right? So men didn't go through a menopause. They kept their libido throughout their life until they died. Women didn't. Sex drive was originally to make babies. If you're not making babies anymore, you don't need a sex drive. What else happens to women during menopause? Our libido goes away. What dries up? Viva la vulva, the vulva seca. As we get older, it dries up, the vagina gets dry, and that has to do with the loss of estrogen and the loss of testosterone. So women after menopause have to fight nature. And this is the one thing that patients get very frustrated about, which is, this is so hard. It is hard, but many women are gonna live with men and age match men. And you have to keep up with them, because what happens often when women say, you know what, I'm just gonna stop, and my partner just has to put up with it, what happens? That partner goes looking for it someplace else. Not all the time, but it happens. We know it happens a lot. So a lot of what I do with my patients in my office is counseling about how do you counter the effects of menopause. And sexual devices, that is what they are called now, not sex toys. The OBGYN, our main governing body, is called the American College of OBGYN, actually put out a committee statement which basically said vibrators, dildos, and anal-specific toys are sexual devices. So it's sort of like it got that badge of legitimacy by this governing body of